Welcome, gather around once again. Here we are, the old bandicoots are back again. Ever since digital advertising became the norm, data or data analysis became the norm as well. Not a single client or none of the large brands, release advertising or test advertising or move forward with a particular project unless it's been vetted and tested, reams and reams of data. So, Narayan, what is your take on what has changed from then to today?
I think it's more or less the same in the sense, like you indicated. There has always been a reliance on data. I mean, from a marketing company or even from a responsible agency's point of view, if you're going to be putting in a large budget behind a brand's advertising, it comes with that huge element of risk. And
Yeah,
one way of mitigating that risk is to find comfort in data. You can say later on, if things didn't work out, but all the data was showing this, and therefore we only followed that. So then the problem only becomes, if we didn't succeed, was the data accurate, not accurate, or did we think, or is one of those bad luck kind of stuff. So basically,
yeah,
in lesser hands, data has always been that convenient crutch kind of stuff. And therefore this has been then, and it's certainly even now, going by what you're seeing, so for some ridiculous work that is happening, and they are probably being triggered by data has said so kind of stuff. Now advertising always had to tackle this problem, because on the one hand, data, like I said, in the right hands can point you in a certain direction, and then the communicators, the folks in the advertising agencies and so on, can take on that meaning behind that data and then make some human sense of it, and therefore make possible some relevant human engagement on the basis of what that data means. Data can be interpreted very, very literally, and therefore you're going to just get, oh, data is telling me that this matters, that fuel economy matters. Let's just say fuel. So I just say fuel economy. Saying fuel economy is not the same thing as persuading somebody to know what fuel economy means in the context of their lives. Just because I said economy, that is just, I'm just passing information. Passing information doesn't convince anybody.
right.
That's like Wikipedia. That's like some dictionary. That doesn't change anybody. So therefore, this conflict, as I see it, between the communication people, the technical data-driven people, and the storytellers. Basically, it's between the data drillers and the storytellers, I suppose. And this
Yeah.
conflict has existed then and now. And somehow, when it seems, it's not like one is better than the other. This is the whole thing, because if the data guys win completely at the expense
Hmm.
of the storytellers, then you get predictable, boring dishwasher kind of advertising.
There's an experiment which I read about quite some time ago. It was in the internet age, but didn't use data in that particular form. So the challenge was that the brand was losing market share and they had to figure out how to change it. Now, there was this company which has now been folded into something else. It was called Nova. Now,
Okay.
what they did was that they took the elements of the pack and broke it up into several pieces. For example, the brand name appearing on the pack, which is the what is the promise on the pack? What are the elements on the pack which are evident? And what is the kind of hierarchy on the pack? Then what they did was to generate a series of multiple options, changing the promise, changing the colors, changing each of the elements on the pack so that you saw 500, 600 variations of the pack. Then what happened was they got customers and then they would be shown six packs on a screen. And before, without thinking, they had to click one as to which one they liked. They were not asked, okay, which one of these packs do you like and why? They were just responding. So then they'd see another pack, click, another pack, click. And then in the back, this whole thing was being captured. And then they figured out that if you changed the promise to this, if you made this, and then this was the kind of combination. They give you either or, they didn't give you either or options. They give you possibilities, which when I read about it the first time, I thought that that was a very clever way of trying to mimic what happened in the market, because in most cases you're into a shopping aisle and you're barely spending that 2 or 3 seconds. And if the pack is familiar, but there's only some small change in that, you're quite willing to pick it up. It's only if it looks very different suddenly that you pause and then say, hey, is this a completely different thing? So I'm putting this out there. What do you think of something like this?
No, I wouldn't know what to make of it, because those are actual marketing kind of stuff, where
Okay.
you're doing stuff to packaging and you're doing stuff to products, you're doing all that. And that's a different dynamic, I think. My own specialization, or something that I have personally witnessed and done work on, has been in the communication of story. And
Okay.
therefore, I don't want it to be extended to everything to do with marketing, because that's a far bigger topic. And
Okay.
probably the people who do all that have my greatest respect or something. It must be the most difficult thing to do in the world with all these. And there, in a way, I can understand data being a great determinant of what it is that you want to do, simply
Hmm.
because the possibilities must be mind boggling, and the number of activities that you can possibly do can be manifold, and therefore you have only a limited budget, and therefore how to spend that limited budget sensibly on the things that are very likely to work and all that. But in the limited thing of, if you finally decided to come to advertising, and you want advertising stories to be able to reach to real people, to put across your product's benefits in a certain manner, then within that, I am saying data can only take you this far, because not only data can take you only this far, data can come in the way of better storytelling. So my own point of view is that between the data grillers, or whatever you want to call them, the data providers on the, or whatever you want to say, the data providers on the one hand and the storytellers on the other hand, if the a client gave the upper hand to the data guys, for instance, and that happens, then if it's too much of an upper hand, and if it's too much of a dominant hand that the data guys are holding, then it becomes difficult to produce communication stories, advertising that really connect with people, because the data can make it seem like as though you were only interested in giving that information across, and then that alone is sufficient to bring about change in human beings. Now that's a wild and a baseless assumption, if you ask me, and therefore that goes against the very basis of storytelling tenets. And therefore you don't want to be that data driven that it seeps into your actual stories in some direct and undiluted form. Then it makes the communication boring. On the other hand, to be fair, if the storytellers had their way almost entirely without regarding data or taking it too seriously, then you can get all kinds of irrelevance too, because you're always going for the punchline, the interesting, the this, that, and the other, and therefore relevance and making a certain point, or making a relevant point, can and has happened, does go out of the window. So to my mind, having been through both these things, and having committed both errors kind of stuff, or having been through these kind of errors from both sides, I think a realization has come to a lot of people who've been through these kind of things with some amount of experience, that data helps. It's a good starting point, but it's not a good middle point or an ending point. It is a good
Okay.
starting point to set off. Oh, you know what? Tell them, talk to them about reliability for this car. Don't tell them about safety. Now, somehow they are able to give you that information. Why they said it? Because data is proving it, because people rate reliability high, or more than safety, and safety is considered boring, but reliability, or whatever it is. I'm just making up stuff, but I'm saying if research had these facts, if data had those kind of observations, then it is useful to provide a storyteller with just that kind of stuff. Please use this information and ignore this. Don't worry about colors, don't worry about beauty, don't worry about speed, don't worry about fuel economy. Just build on reliability. For whatever reason, all my data is pointing to that, and because my consumers are in that market, for whatever reasons, I don't need to know the research methodologies you use to reach that conclusion. But if that is true, then tell me that, and then I'll take the ball from there and run. All I need to know is I need to interpret now reliability in terms of human stories, and therefore our roles are clear. Therefore you hold control over what must be communicated, and I hold control over how it must be told. The roles are sort of crystal clear, And in my mind, that would be the ideal way to use. And coming to what seems to be happening today, that there is simply so much of online data with a fragmentation of channels, with so many, with all this advertising that is going on in a programmed stuff, and all that stuff is going on. Nobody directly understands this. You're just understanding the media on the internet only through numbers and excel sheets, basically, because it's telling you this where it was appeared so many number of times, it was showed up this many number of times, this is the proof, this is the audit. And what are your sales figures
Yeah.
like? Oh yeah, then maybe this is working. And oh, your series are tanking. Oh, then maybe this is not working. Now I don't know if there is anything more sensible or anything more insightful or nuanced that you're particularly getting. Maybe you do, I don't know. I don't know enough about this, but I'm getting the feeling that as though with we are getting swamped by so much data, that the better heads must be sort of swimming with this. And therefore, beyond drawing broad brushstrokes of this overall works or this is doesn't seem to be working, are we really getting a lot of shades of gray in between to know that, this could be tried, or that medium can be changed, or maybe we drop only two of these sites but you bring in three of the other sites? Is that being made possible? I doubt it. So I have a feeling overwhelming amount of data is probably paralyzing a lot of people, from stopping them from coming to subtler conclusions, and maybe stopping
Conclusions.
them at the level of very broad and overarching kind of conclusions. And that's not of great help, I should think.
Yeah, the waterfall of data and the norm right now, because the amount of data that is being collected and gathered and interpreted is increasing by the day. Some of it we're using AI and then saying, okay, this is how the AI is summing it up. There was a whole human element which was used in the summing up because it meant that somebody was with experience was going through the data and then arriving at conclusions.
True.
Now we are saying the collective wisdom of AI or whatever it is used for the summing up, and then you're moving ahead based on that. This campaign is being used to elicit a response, and that is, I think, the point at which the whole deviation happens. You have the takeoff point, like you said. How am I going to connect emotionally? That cannot be dictated. That shouldn't be dictated, because then it becomes like, okay, this all that needs to come through is this. How that is done, like we've discussed in a previous episode, that it can't be that there is only one way to get across to a customer. There is culturally just one norm which will be accepted universally. But data is now occupying a major seat at the table, which it may not have occupied, let's say, a couple of or 3 decades ago. Is that reading right, or do you think that there is a difference
No,
that
it is.
the
I think
important?
the sheer volume of data,
Ah,
because of this burgeoning of social media and basically online stuff, has just made the data so vast, so complex. So, how are we to really pick out patterns? It is almost like you can have any arguments that or hypothesis you want to put out, and you can search for data that will support it. And I'm sure that there will be enough data that you can make support it kind of stuff,
yeah,
which is not useful. That means you're saying that I was thinking about doing this anyway, and I'm using some, sort of data to serve my purpose. It is not like data is serving to illuminate certain things and then make me think or take me in a new direction. It was based
yeah,
on so many, human interactions in so many rooms and qualitative stuff and all that. And then they said, this is what seems to be coming out. What do we do with this? That was therefore the truth or whatever it is that was coming out from these meetings with house eyes or whoever was coming out from out there. And therefore we as marketers, advertising people, were listening to stuff and saying, oh, is jewelry being worn like this? Is platinum being worn like that? Is gold going out of something? Are diamonds really good for marriages? All these things people are telling us.
yeah,
And then we said, oh, this seems to be important, not only in the south, but also in the north, also in the east. And then we said, can we make something from there? And therefore,
right,
data as a point of, as a starting point where it guided you, and it told you something about what was going on out there. And then you used that to tell your stories, was the way data was being used very broadly. That was what the whole purpose of data was.
yeah,
Now the data is probably so complex and so complete, and it is sort of incestuous in that it is feeding itself. I'm
yeah,
putting out my ads, and then I'm getting back data about how the ads I've put out are performing, and therefore I'm getting back more data. So it's that, and but I put it in about 3,72,586 places. Therefore, I'm getting a reams of data about how they performed in each of them, and so all I'm learning is more and more about what I did and what I'm getting back, what I did and what I'm getting back. It is not guiding you necessarily to have a starting point. Hey, why don't you consider this? Where is that piece
So,
of data that tells you this is what is
no,
going on in the world outside of ourselves?
in a sense, you're saying that the feedback loop has become the hamster's wheel.
Yeah, to my mind, that's what it seems, and it feels like a sort of a futile thing to be chasing.
It's like, you're running endlessly and you think you're going places. Or maybe we're wrong. We're old bandicoots after all. So,
Yeah. It could be. I'm only, yeah, we're sharing what we know. There's somebody I know in their 30s will pipe up and say, what rubbish. Yeah,
yeah,
possible.
they'll probably come back to us and say that's because you don't know how to read the data. You don't know how to interpret the data. You don't know where this is leading and all that, which, yes,
Yeah.
in our old wisdom, yes, we don't know. We don't know exactly where it originated. But we are seeing that the effect of it, it's not as if having all that additional data is suddenly making this whole thing far more efficient than it was before, which we'll visit in a future episode. Thanks, Narayan. So, on that note, I think the summing up is that yes, we welcome data, we welcome the insights from data, but it should never become a point when the data dictates what creative should become. So, on that note, we'll wrap up this time and we'll be back soon. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening.